Good day to those listening and those watching. I am Garrett Pedlar, and with me is Nada Kovinich. Together, we are your Small Town Realtor Podcast. Make sure to like, follow, share this episode, and of course, drop us a comment on your takeaways from this episode. We appreciate you being here and hope you enjoy this episode. Good day, everybody. So happy to be with you here today and with Nada. We have an incredible episode talking about everyone knows everyone. We all know in our small towns, even a 100,000 town, it can still feel small, believe it or not. And everybody knows everybody's business. Your clients aren't anonymous. Everybody knows 10 agents. Everybody, is it their a cousin, a friend, an ex-spouse, a neighbor, a coworker. People know who is selling before the sign goes up. It is always a little comical to me. You go for a walk and, I heard Ricky's selling down the road, and they tell you information. Well, there's a good lead. Maybe go knock on a door. But it always seems like word gets around very quick of who's selling and also maybe why they're selling. And it's not always just a downsizing, upsizing, whatever the story may be. And unfortunately, there is the scenarios when it's who's separating and who's struggling financially and who's inherited money. And when you ask about it, they ask about it, is what do you do and what should you do? And in a small town, that unfortunately can be a tough thing to route as you go throughout your day, making and obtaining utmost professionalism. And that's what we're here to talk about today in this episode, navigating that pressure professionally.
It's such a good topic. When I originally was getting into a career path, I decided I was going to go into psychology. And I went to university, I took psychology, and I thought that was the career path I was going to take. I never knew that I would use more psychology in real estate than what I would use as a psychologist, because we are navigating these super complicated scenarios, whether it be a death, whether it be a divorce, whether, again, financial trouble. A lot of these things, when we're coming into a home, people are going to talk to you about the struggles that they're facing whenever they're selling their home. And it's not always those difficult situations, but a lot of the time you are hearing about these very complicated scenarios and situations that people are going through. And it's our job to make sure that we maintain a professionalism with that. There is so much gossip in small towns. Everyone knows everyone's business, no matter what. You run into people, and of course, they want to know, is it true that Johnny and Sarah are selling their home because they're getting a divorce or they're having financial trouble? Our job is to stay super professional. And one of the other reasons, it's not only is it important not to gossip, but if you're starting to tell the story and becoming a storyteller of, they're getting a divorce, Johnny and Sarah are separating, people might now come into negotiating on that house differently than if you had maintained professionalism and not become a storyteller. So if you maintain that professionalism, they're not going to necessarily try to come in with that lowball offer, because they think now that they know Johnny and Sarah are separating, there's an opportunity there for them to possibly have a lowball offer, and that can affect the sale price of a home. So don't become a storyteller in your small town. Keep that professionalism as much as you possibly can.
Well, and in this market where tougher economic times and a tougher market we find ourselves, is lowball offers are already easy to come by. You don't need to give them more ammo to help out that lowball offer. It's a beautiful industry where we got to be many professions. Psychologist is one, Nada just explained. And so we all know we wear a lot of hats. And so it's putting the right hat on and being professional. Being in that grocery store, the post office, what always gets me is hearing, we all have good ears, most of us, is hearing these small little conversations that happen in public places that have no reason to be in public places. And so when they talk to you at a post office or the grocery store, it's, oh, why are they selling? Is it because of the divorce? I heard they're in trouble. Did that deal fall apart? What did they really get for it? It's being professionalism. It's, they're not asked with malicious intent, and most of the time people asking those questions aren't actually going to buy that house and don't need to know, don't have to know. They're asking pure out of gossiping, and they don't put it that way. That's truly what it is. But it's them telling their friend, hey, Garrett told me this. You're going to want to go check out X Broad Street. I heard they're in a divorce. So word spreading, and, these are questions asked casually, but, they frame it as conversation, and it's how you frame it and turn it around. It's not your story to tell. And even a simple, hey, give me your phone number. Let me give you a call and let's talk further. If they aren't truly serious about buying that house, they're not going to give you their phone number, and they're going to say, no, it's all good. I was just curious. And you're going to get an answer pretty quick.
Yeah. And let's run with that. Thumper I believe it was Thumper from Bambi said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And you can really use that in a scenario like this, because a lot of the times you're even sitting with a group of friends, and they're close friends, and they probably know your client who is selling the house, and they know the gossip. And if you're out for lunch, especially me and the girls, we're out for lunch, and they know about a scenario of what might be happening, say it's a divorce or a death. They want to start asking you questions because they're curious. We're small town. We know everyone. And unfortunately, in human nature, we do want to know, well, what is happening? Why is this going on? And it's not malicious a lot of the time. It's just our human nature. And it's your job in those scenarios when people are saying to you, oh, why are they selling? What is going on? You have to just step back for a minute and say, that's kind of a conversation I want to keep with me and my client. I want to protect them. And it's my job to make sure that I'm not saying too much about their situation. I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable, because the last thing you want to have happen is it comes back to your client that they heard you were out with the girls at lunch, or boys, Garrett, in your situation, and you're out with the girls at lunch, and you were telling all of the information that you knew about that client. Not only is it going to affect your relationship on a personal level with the client, but it's also going to affect you professionally, because that client is now going to say, be careful. If you're using Nada, she might divulge some of that information that you don't want out in the public. When your client's listing with you or buying with you, they're trusting you. They're trusting that the information that they're giving you is something that you're going to hold safe, tight, and dear, and not bring out to the public, because there's already going to be so much gossip around those tough scenarios. Not a normal scenario where someone's just selling their house to upsize, downsize. No one really gossips about that. But in those divorces or the deaths or money troubles, which we often are seeing right now, unfortunately, you don't want to be the one who's out there gossiping. Be Thumper. Make sure if you don't have anything nice to say, you don't say anything at all. And that's just going to help make your client feel comfortable. And if they know someone else who's now in another difficult situation, they're going to feel more confident and more safe to say to their friend, colleague, family, when Nada listed our home, she wasn't out there gossiping about us. And it can be hard because, you do want to join in on those conversations, but step back, don't do it. Keep your clients at your top priority, and they'll be more likely to refer you to other people when they're feeling safe and they feel protected, because that's our job. Our job is to protect those clients as much as we possibly can.
And you can tell who has kids in this duo with a Thumper poll. That was awesome. But that's besides the point. Is everyone is connected, and who you're talking to there's a great chance, in the world, they say you're connected by 7 connections. In a small town, it's probably more like 1 or 2 connections, probably the one. And so that just goes to say everyone is connected some way, somehow. The word can spread so quick. And the last thing you want to do, like Nada is had touched on, is being known as that person that may say something that has nothing to do with providing value to the home and trying to give its worth. The seller's private information is nothing of concern to that buyer. That person very likely, like I said, might be related to your client, a friend of your client. People will repeat what you say. That is human nature, for people to repeat what they're told. And unfortunately, some people will distort that unintentionally, most of the time, will distort that. And, we all have people in, these small towns. We all know those. Like, it goes without saying of all this. We all have those people that we know of in a small town that, go to are the biggest preachers of gossip. I don't go to the hair salon, but I've been told that's quite the gossip station. So I go to the barber shop and we talk sports. So that doesn't happen. But we all have these people we know in the town that don't ever hold back saying, talking about what the news they heard. And, it's none of their business. And they're purely just want to have something to talk to about their friends. So don't give it to them. And your words carry weight like wildfire, especially in a small town.
And right there, the hairdresser, I'm going to just use that as a really important example for women in this industry. When you are at the hairdresser, everyone can hear your conversation, especially if you're in a larger salon, and you get the questions, and everybody is in there gossiping. I mean, you get a bunch of women together in a hair salon, and all it is gossip. And that's definitely when you need to be careful with what you say, because it's not necessarily, if you're talking to, say, a really good friend and you're both in there getting your hair done, or you're anywhere, it's not only what you're saying to your friend, it's what other people are also overhearing you say. So you've got to be cautious, who is around when you're having these conversations, because if you're sitting there gossiping, this is now your reputation, and people will, if people hear you talking about other people, they know that you're going to talk about them. And if they hear you storytelling about other people, they know that you're going to storytell about them. And even if you don't know the other people in the room, unfortunately, you're always being judged, and you will be judged in that moment. You have to always consistently remember that you are wearing your brand everywhere you go, every conversation you have, even if you're not physically wearing it. You are your brand. You are the face of your brand, and you don't want to be known as that storyteller, because people will be less confident in you. Even if it's one of those things you think is such a little factor, you might even just make a quick message that, oh, that client was quite difficult to deal with. You don't know if their sister is sitting behind you listening to you, and that goes back to the client, or that can spread like wildfire so quickly, those situations. I've dealt with a lot of really complicated deals and a lot of divorces that are super public in our area, and you don't want to be known as the one that is spreading the news, spreading the wildfire, and spreading the gossip. Keep it to yourself. Maintain the professionalism. It's the best way that you're going to make your client and everyone around you actually feel more comfortable in those situations.
Okay, we've told you what not to say, and not to say the gossip. So how do you deflect that moment with keeping the professionalism, not being totally divergent and switching the topic? There's a way to do it without totally walking away, but still keeping professionalism. And it's definitely done by not being aggressive. You don't want to be defensive, and sure as heck, don't be awkward. Simple responses, I can't really speak to that. You'd have to ask them. I don't get into personal details. That's not my business. I'm just here to focus on the transaction, business face only, and even on the, hey, let's set up a phone call and let's talk the real stuff, not the personal stuff. And then redirect, and then, oh yeah, also, how was Billy's hockey game there the other day? It's get off of the topic without diverging immediately from it, and make sure they know you heard what they said, so that they feel heard. Everybody wants to feel heard, but do detract from it and get off that topic about as quick as possible. It's using your calm, neutral, consistent attributes of responding to that person. Over time, people stop asking, and they'll stop asking the questions you don't want to be asked. Because I promise you, when they ask you about real estate, you are going to bang them with a heck of a good real estate answer. But if they ever are peppering you with those personal things, you're going to have these calm, neutral, consistent responses that they're going to get the point. This guy or girl doesn't care to talk about that stuff. I'm here to talk business. So keep it business. You train your environment is a huge, huge thing here. And people, once again, you keep on staying with that momentum and keeping the calm, neutral, consistent behavior. People will get the hint.
Yeah, exactly. And you run into these scenarios also where because it's such a small town and everyone is familiar with everyone, you sometimes think that they know the details. So you might accidentally make a mistake. And I made one. So I wanted to tell a quick little story about that. I had a client, she was using a mortgage broker that was her cousin. They were a very tight-knit family. So I felt like everyone knew all the details. And I made the mistake by calling that mortgage broker, who I also was good friends with. We all were good friends. We all knew each other really well. So we were very familiar with one another. And I called the mortgage broker, and I had said a couple of details that I really didn't think was an issue. It just kind of discussed the property a little bit, and I had mentioned some plans that they had with that property, and nothing that would even affect the mortgage or anything like that. Well, that was a big mistake. They did not want anyone in their family knowing any of the details that they were doing with that property. They didn't even want me discussing anything with the mortgage broker. Often, I'm sure, Garrett, you talk to your client's mortgage broker to help, render the deal a little quicker or give some details. Well, this was not the right scenario. So when you're dealing with people's lives, their livelihood, their privacy, even when they know that person very well, I mean, it was a family member, you need to be very cautious on how you deal with that. You have to make sure that if you're going to call that mortgage broker, even if it is a family member, you touch base with that client and say, hey, I think we can make this run just a little bit smoother if I have the discussion with your mortgage broker. Is there anything you don't want me to tell them? Especially when it's family. Because a lot of the times your clients have divulged so much information just to you, and that's your information to hold sacred for them. So you have to make sure that you're asking, what do you want? What do you want me to tell them? Can I have these conversations? Are you comfortable with me having this conversation? People can be very private, and you might not even realize it because you've sat with them, you've had drinks with them, and they've talked about everything going on in their lives. But there are little parts and pieces of people's lives that they like to keep extremely private. And when you're working with them, they're letting you in to that little piece of their life that they might not let anyone else into. So be very cautious when you're dealing with those type of scenarios as well.
Well, isn't this incredible? We're admitting our faults too, guys. Nobody's perfect in this world. So I appreciate you sharing that story, Nada. And I think what you were commenting on too is almost treat everybody like they are the most private individual, and reconfirm, hey, can I tell this to your mortgage agent? Can I tell this to your lawyer? Is maybe a bit of a tip on, and treat everybody like they are super private. Don't assume anything, because I've done assumptions in my day, and unfortunately it just makes an ass of you and me. But small towns have long memories. Something similar with the scenario of bad publicity spreads like wildfire, and good publicity takes a while to grow. It's the same concept with being known as the gossiper in town. That will get around real quick. Who'd you hear that from? Oh, that was Garrett. That is going to go around just like wildfire. So people remember who was discreet. They will, like Nada's mentioning, hey, you're going through a tough scenario, friend. I know the agent I was using was very discreet, and I've never heard him talking about anybody else's business around town. You should give Garrett a call, give Nada a call, give you, the listener, a call. Your business will outlast one conversation, and protecting someone else's dignity protects your own. So definitely be very cognizant of who's in the room when you're talking. And sometimes that room's a grocery store, and that's a big room. So that's my wrap on this, and Nada, give us your side.
So I think, it also can become very awkward because you will sit in these situations where people are gossiping about your client and they're just spinning it, and the truth. And you might be sitting in that scenario and you want to end that. You don't want to see them gossiping about your client when what they're saying isn't true. And that can be a very, very difficult situation to be sitting through. And I sit through it so often. I mean, I think probably women gossip a little more than men, Garrett. And
No.
I know it can be quite shocking. I do know a lot of men, though, that can gossip as well. We have a few of them in our community. And when we're sitting there and it's the girls and we're all having these conversations and we're talking about, they start to talk about your client, and you kind of want to jump in and say, no, that's not true. This is what actually happened. Take a breath, stop yourself. And you have to be very cautious on how you deal with that situation. And often I'll even say to them, you might want to have a chat with so-and-so because you may have heard things a little bit differently. It becomes a bit of that telephone game where the first person tells the story, and by the time it gets to the fourth person, the story's completely changed. And I see it all the time. So when you're sitting through those scenarios, and you sometimes want to get in on that conversation and you want to correct them, but it's best for you to make comments like, oh, I don't know if you guys necessarily have this story completely straight. You might want to have a chat with them. And that kind of steps them back, going, oh, okay, well, what really is going on? You must know. And again, you've got to use those lines that Garrett said, that this is something that I discuss with them. And unfortunately, I just feel it's better that I leave it between me and them instead of spreading it to everyone else. You want to keep that client very protected during this process, because you really, again, don't want to be the storyteller. You don't want to be the gossiper. You want to make sure that you're sitting in those scenarios and you're always on. I mean, that's real estate. You are always on, and you're always working, and you're always representing your brand, and make sure you're representing your brand accordingly when you're in those very difficult conversations with people.
Absolutely. And just quickly, a bit of a reframe, if we haven't nailed it back to you yet, is watch who you're talking about, and do you know what? Just don't do it. It's a simple reframing, and just be calm, neutral, discreet, safe. People in your community will recognize that, because in small towns, trust spreads just as quickly as gossip.
And let's close this out here now, Garrett. And I'm actually going to read this line because I don't want to get this incorrectly, because I think it's very important. Obviously, lots of gossip in small towns. Stay out of it. But this is one of our lines. And the way you protect other people's business is the way people decide whether they trust you with theirs. So protect their business. Be the agent that people trust and know isn't going to be out there telling their story. Let your client tell their story. Don't be the one that tells the story for them. So let's close it out today. If you like this episode, make sure you hit like, you share the episode with your friends. Let's get the word out there. Small town realtors, we rock, and let's show people why we can grow our businesses just as much as those big cities.